You're listening to the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans.
If you want to have guarantees, you have to buy a wash machine.
Fonte with a scooping header.
We don't lose a match, either we win or we learn. And today we learned.
It's infield to Mane, 25 yards out. Lovely ball for Bella. Onside, 1-0. Buffon shot. Oh my word!
Unbelievable. We ran around the pitch like Bambi on ice. It was very, very embarrassing to watch.
And now, your host, Matt Markstone.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Southampton Delivery Podcast, a podcast and newsletter dedicated to the Southampton Football Club and all of the SFC fans, and available right here on southamptondelivery.com. My name is Matt Markstone. I am the host of the show, and no matter where you are, no matter how you may be listening, whether this is your first time or you've been here before, thanks for making the show part of your day. I hope that you enjoy it. And this week, I am lucky enough to once again be joined by Lucy Highnett. You can find her on Twitter at Lucy Highnett, or you can get her thoughts each and every week, or most weeks at least, on the Total Saints podcast, where she is a panelist. And this week we had the opportunity to talk about Saints' win at Bramall Lane in Sheffield, which is where Lucy lives. And so Lucy was at the match. We get her thoughts on all of that, and we answered lots of your questions. And even though it was just one match and there are important matches coming up, Lucy and I talked at length about team selection, about shape, about we had lots of questions and lots of kind of theories to try to work out. So the episode goes a bit long, but that's just the way it works out when you kind of enjoy the conversation that you're having. We have some questions from you, from listeners, that we try to address. And some of them we do a pretty good job, and some of them I completely blow. I also let out a few dark secrets about myself, and I apologize for in advance for all of that. I've tried to cover some of it up with the editing. Some of it has been unsuccessful. But anyway, so if you would like to get in touch with Lucy, as I said before, she's on Twitter at Lucy Highnett. You can do that there. And if you like the show, you may also like the newsletter, which comes out each and every Friday. We send out articles and other things, updates on the show and on the team and everything else that you can get. You can subscribe to all of that at southamptondelivery.com. There are links there for that. But now, with the link to the show and everything else, let's get to my interview with Lucy. I hope you enjoy it. And we look forward to Friday and, of course, next week when we got to go down to that other town. So let's talk to you on the other side of the show. Hope you enjoy it. We'd like to welcome back to the Southampton Delivery Podcast, Lucy Highnett. You can find her on Twitter at Lucy Highnett, and you can get her thoughts each and every week on the Total Saints podcast, as she's one of the panel members. But Lucy, you were on the season preview, and you're one of the guests that I continuously ask back. So thanks again, and welcome back.
Thank you for having me back. I think it's going slightly better than I expected, given the fixtures we had to start with. So I think, season preview optimism is currently being warranted.
Yeah, I kind of went from being super optimistic, and even though we had tough fixtures, to kind of feeling like we weren't quite there. And then I don't know, we had moments yesterday where we were like terrible, and then we still managed somehow to look decent in the end. And I think Ralph, I don't know if he just made up for a mistake at the beginning with the way he set up the team, or if he, just is a genius. And I don't know which one I want to go with yet, but I know where I lean, but maybe we'll talk about it a little bit. But anyway, you were at the match yesterday because the Saints came to you for once in your life.
Yeah, unusually didn't have to get on a train or on a long car journey. Only had 4 miles, which I broke up with trips to the pub. So yeah, no, it was a good day. Kind of went better than I expected, if I'm honest. Despite giving a 2-1 prediction on the Total Saints podcast by yesterday morning, I was like, well, we really aren't going to get anything out of this. It's a really hard place to go. And like the mood around Sheffield is very kind of buoyant, and Sheffield United fans really kind of rate their team. So I was kind of feeling a bit negative, but no, it went really well yesterday, despite some pretty dodgy moments, as he mentioned. So yeah, good day.
Yeah, absolutely. I talked to a guy who runs a Sheffield United podcast. It's called the Blades Pod, and Ben, who does that show, Ben Meakin. I talked to him before the season started for one of the Patreon episodes, and he was very, very high on the team. And in previous seasons, when I've talked to people who do, who are coming up with a team, usually they're like, well, if we survive, we'll be fine. And they kind of felt really, really good about everything. And I was, even when I spoke to him earlier last week for his show, they sounded super confident, and I was a little bit worried. And then you see the way the team's set up, which I think is something we'll get to. And I was a little bit, it worried me a little bit. I was not as confident when I woke up yesterday morning as I was maybe a couple of weeks ago, I guess. But, I mean, anything new? I mean, people have heard from you pretty recently, but anything change? I know you went on some sort of holiday. I don't know where you went. I forget.
I went to Prague. Yeah. My husband and I went to Prague. It was really good. Recommend it, definitely. Good weather as well, which was kind of unexpected. And then since then we have had an offer accepted on a house, so we're kind of getting things moving with that. But other than that, life's kind of pretty straightforward at the moment. Not a lot to report, really. Well,
congratulations. I mean, those are two big things. For me, leaving the country is a big thing, and then of course the house that's huge. That's adult life 101, I think.
Yeah, I do feel like I'm probably a real adult now. I mean, probably at 28, I should have realised that I'm a real adult. But yeah, that's one of those kind of big adult steps. I'm like, whoa, that's big. You
mentioned you broke up the walk to the ground, to Bramall Lane, with trips to the pub. But I mean, what's an away day like in Sheffield for fans who come up, and I guess for you who live there? So maybe you don't call it an away day, but what does that day look like for most fans?
Well, I think it's probably quite different for me than it is for like kind of the average travelling fan, because I live in the north side of the city, quite a long way from the ground. The train station, which I suppose is how many people would get there, is pretty close to the ground, and you kind of take quite a different route. So I was kind of in a lot of pubs that are kind of nearer the kind of Sheffield Wednesday end of the city. So actually, we sat there in our Saint shirts, eating our lunch and having a beer, and getting lots of kind of like, "Come on, yes, you can do it, Southampton," from like random Wednesday fans who felt the need to kind of give us which was good actually, because we kind of sat there being like, "Oh, should we be in Sheffield in our Saints kit? Should we really be doing this?" But yeah, no, because we were on kind of different side of the city, it was all pretty good. So yeah, we spent a lot of time in an area called Kelham Island, which kind of the old industrial heart of the city, where it's kind of now been taken over by a lot of like microbreweries and kind of pubs and things, and it's kind of like a really good area for a drink, but probably not kind of the conventional area you'd go for if you're coming from the station and going to the ground, because it would just be way out of your way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think a lot of people probably make their way up the hill into town via a couple of pubs, the Globe and the Howard, on their way up. They're perfectly decent pubs, but I just didn't see the point in going into town just to come back out again, kind of thing. So, sure. Yeah, no, it's a good place, Sheffield, if you didn't go this time and you are thinking about it next time, because I'm pretty sure they'll be in the league next season. Yeah, if you think about it, Sheffield is a good place to go for a drink, and I think it's got like quite a nice vibe as a city. I obviously think that because I chose to stay here for like 10 years, but buy a house there, that kind of thing. But yeah, there's some really good places, and if you are so inclined to kind of go a bit more off the unbeaten track, then there are lots of interesting places to be. Good for a weekend as well, actually, if you fancy that kind of thing. But I probably should have said all of that before the game, not after it.
That's okay. I mean, given that you live in kind of Sheffield Wednesday territory, people pretty happy last night? Do they celebrate a United loss as if Sheffield Wednesday won?
Yeah, not quite to that extent, but we did have a lot of happy Wednesday fans come up to us on the way on the tram home to be like, "Yes, great result, well done, blah blah blah." Yeah, they are pretty happy about it, and I think also because Sheffield Wednesday are kind of one of those teams that kind of feel like they're a big club. I think they've got a lot of history, and they're kind of like one of the oldest clubs in the country. So I feel they are always a bit embittered when United are doing better than them, and I think that kind of gives them extra extra joy in enjoying a Sheffield United defeat, I think.
I will say, early on when I started watching football, I did not know that Sheffield had 2 teams. I thought they only had Wednesday. That might be an American thing, and I don't think Sheffield United fans will be listening to this. And that was just, I didn't know very many teams, and the teams that I knew were it was a ridiculous kind of hodgepodge of teams that were scattered around the whole country. But Wednesday was one of them, and I don't know. That's just I think
the name sticks in your head as well, doesn't it? Because it's kind of a bit unusual.
Right. There are a lot of Uniteds, and there are not a lot of Wednesdays. I mean, it's just whatever. But yeah, I mean, I'm always interested to kind of know that stuff and see. And you mentioned, should we be in Sheffield in our Saints kits? Is there generally like trouble for visiting fans, or is that more just if it was United versus Wednesday, and that would be a thing that you wouldn't want to mix? Yeah.
Stay clear of Sheffield United Wednesday. I accidentally got myself caught in Derby Day public transport last season, and it was pretty terrifying. So yeah, I wouldn't advise that. No, but generally, I'd say it was a pretty kind of like relaxed mood. I think there was a bit of tension at the end of the game yesterday, just because the nature of a kind of evenly balanced game. I think the VAR situation didn't help, and I think quite rightly, there's a lot of kind of excitement around Derby Day coming up. Mm-hmm. So there's been a lot of quite like pumped up chanting about Pompey, which I'm all for, but I think if you're kind of an outsider, kind of almost being on the end of that, you're probably a bit taken aback, especially when you think you probably should have got a result out of the game. So I wouldn't say there's generally any kind of problems, and I would say Sheffield's a pretty safe kind of city that I feel pretty comfortable with. But yeah, I think at the end of the game yesterday there's probably a little bit more tension than you'd expect.
I mean, Sheffield fans, I think, from especially sitting in the ground where you don't have access to all of the replays and all of the analysis and all the conversations going on from the commentators on TV when you're walking through a VAR decision. And I mean, I saw all the decisions probably 4 or 5 times, and I think they were all correct, but I can 100% understand that a Sheffield United fan sitting in the ground is going like, we've been had here. This is not right. And Ollie McBurney doesn't like shin guards or VAR, and it's just I can understand it. So 100%. But I mean, let's get to how that all kind of happened, and we'll just start kind of with the team sheet. And I'm not sure where you were on your pub journey and when the team sheet came out, but when you saw it, what were your initial thoughts when you saw the way the team was listed? I won't even say lined up because I had no idea what they were doing. But what were you thinking?
Well, I when I originally looked at it, I know Djenepo has kind of filled in at wing back before, but I'd kind of just assumed that Yoshida was playing left back. I didn't see it because I kind of wasn't on Twitter, so I didn't kind of know what other people had seen. I just literally saw the lineup, and I kind of assumed it was kind of a back four with Yoshida filling in at left back. So it wasn't really how I expected when they kind of set up on the pitch. So it was a bit of a shock, and I think the first half an hour before the tactical switch kind of made it even more of a shock because it was all a bit confusing. And I know after the game, Ralph was very adamant that Djenepo can do a job at left wing back, but on the evidence of the first half an hour, I don't think he actually can, or if he can, he can't yet, and it's going to take a lot of work. He was consistently caught out of kind of place, lost track of people, and I think when you've got a left centre back like Yannick Vestergaard, who isn't the quickest in the world, actually is probably one of the slowest, leaving him that exposed probably isn't that advisable.
It's just rude.
I felt like he was kind of looking round like, where's he gone? Like, where are you? You're meant to be back there. And I don't even want to kind of criticize Djenepo for it, because I just feel like he's being asked to do a job that isn't really his job. And the whole balance of the team just seemed a bit off. Yeah. So yeah, it was kind of an interesting starting lineup, which I wasn't sure what to make of, and it kind of I kind of was even more confused when we kicked off.
Yeah. Well, I would say that in the past when Djenepo's came on and come on for the left wing back spot, I would say he just played on the left side. Like he very rarely lined up and got all the way back in line in a kind of a defensive situation with them and with the rest of the back 4 or 5. But it's, like you said, that's not his role. That's not what he generally does. He's an attacker, and if you look at him, everything about him says I'm an attacker. The way he tackles, the way he runs at people, his lack of positional kind of defensive discipline is totally there. And like you said, leaving Vestergaard that exposed was not ideal. And Vestergaard got a lot of criticism on our coverage here for just being, not good enough. And I don't know how much of that was down to Djenepo and just not being good enough there. And then, Cedric got a lot of praise for coming in and kind of, picking up the slack for Vestergaard. But I don't know how much of that is fair because of just Djenepo was out of position. That just basically is what it was. And we'll kind of talk about it as we go. But I think one of the things that was picked up earlier in the week is, Bertrand had trained before the international break, didn't play against Manchester United. And then had trained and was fine, took part in all the games and stuff like that over the international break, and was only on the bench here. And that's one of those things where we're going out there without a natural left wing back or left back at all. And we have Bertrand on the bench. We have Valerie on the bench. Cedric can play at left back. We have all these options, but we choose to put Djenepo on. And that's one of those things where it maybe is like, I start to wonder what Ralph is thinking when he's doing it, and I don't know if I'm alone in that or if you're kind of there, and I'm not sure if that's, I'm not sure if that's fair or if I just need to be, more open-minded about how the team can be set up and should be set up going forward.
I kind of tend to lean towards your kind of perception. I think there are clearly problems between Bertrand and Hasenhüttl. I got a bit of grief yesterday on Twitter for suggesting that the injury wasn't that much of an injury. Apparently I should spend less time with unsubstantiated rumours or something like that. But I just don't think at this point you can claim that this is an injury problem or he was benched because of concerns about their fitness. I think the way Ralph has kind of mentioned Bertrand being an option rather than, his kind of left back and the kind of paused, quite awkward way he's dealt with that situation when he's been asked about it suggests there are problems there. And I think if there weren't problems, he'd be an absolute shoo-in because we don't have many left-footed players. In fact, probably is it him and Vokins that are the only left-footed players around? Really? I can't think of any others unless I'm missing someone.
I'm running for the team. I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. And I think there is a fundamental lack of balance because even Cedric, who I thought really did have quite a good game and is showing kind of a lot of kind of solidity, which I don't think we necessarily identify him with. Even he isn't a left-footed player and isn't going to go very wide or very kind of progressive with his runs because he'll always need to cut back, and we saw that quite a lot in the second half. It was kind of down my corner of the pitch, Cedric having to kind of cut back, which is perfectly natural, but it kind of just it kind of affects the way you can attack, I think, and a lot of times those overlapping runs would have been really quite useful.
Yeah.
So, I think there are clearly problems there, and I think what makes it even more concerning is that we were left under the impression in the summer when Target was sold that Ralph was happy to use Vokins as an alternative or a deputy or whatever. And it seems to be quite clear that he's not quite happy with where Vokins is. I think a lot of fans have kind of taken quite a lot of umbrage with that because people are keen to see our academy players, but for whatever reason he doesn't think he's ready, which I'm kind of quite happy with. But that probably means you should find a way to sort out this Bertrand issue, or we shouldn't have sold Target, or something along those lines, because it doesn't strike me as incredibly sustainable to kind of work with players playing out of position.
No.
To kind of cover that. And as we saw yesterday, kind of whatever the case is, whether you use Cedric over there or someone else, Djenepo kind of isn't the answer, I don't think. Particularly not when you're dealing with quite a complex tactics. Kind of Sheffield United tactics aren't kind of run of the mill, and I think if you've got quite a lot to deal with in terms of runners and things, then that kind of particularly doesn't work. So I'm really hoping there is kind of a kind of positive outcome to that standoff, which I think there is with Bertrand. And if not, I kind of think that there needs to be more of a review. I think also, I don't know if you'd kind of thought about this, not only is Bertrand in the shoot, I don't really understand what's happened with Valerie either.
Yeah, no, I for me, the Bertrand Target thing is, I remember over the summer we were open for offers for either of them, and you kind of look at the two of them and their profiles, and Target kind of had the youth on his side, and even though he's not that young, but he's got the academy, kind of all that stuff, and then he doesn't necessarily have the pace and some of the other things that I think that Hasenhüttl would want. Bertrand does have those things, even though he's a bit older. I mean, some experience in the team is not going to be the worst thing in the world. But then you kind of look, and Hasenhüttl is taking the captaincy from Bertrand and giving it to Højbjerg. That's one of the things he did kind of early on, and maybe, I don't know, Bertrand I didn't really see Bertrand as caring that much about that. Like, he doesn't ever really seem to care that much. It's just kind of how he carries himself. But I don't know what's happened now. And Valerie, I just have no idea. I thought he came on last year and did great. And one of the things I just wrote on the outline was, we have two players that went out on loan last year that are back at the club. One, I think Buffal was gone before Hasenhüttl got here, but Cedric went out on loan, early on in Hasenhüttl's tenure, and he's come back and kind of been embraced. And whether it's just a change in his attitude or something that Hasenhüttl has seen from him, I think I think that shows that Hasenhüttl has the man management to be able to sort these issues out. But I don't know what's happening in terms of Bertrand and Valerie, and what the missing kind of piece is there. And they were, we had two fullbacks on the bench yesterday, which I'm not sure is normal, and we had two fullbacks and a center back on the bench yesterday, in which I feel like that's more of a defensive bench that we would normally have. So I'm not sure kind of exactly how things are working out or anything else, but it's definitely something that I think we have to pay attention to and watch and discuss. And I think in the newsletter last week, I just wrote that maybe we don't get carried away with the Bertrand stuff. We'll see how it kind of plays out. But I said that fully expecting him to be included, to be in the starting lineup this week if he was fully healthy, and he wasn't. And to see the way we lined up with kind of the hodgepodge of left-sided defense, it doesn't fill me with a bunch of confidence that we're getting closer to a solution there.
Yeah, and I think going back to what you're saying about kind of felt like a quite defensive bench. I think the reason he did start Djenepo there, and I think that what was something he discussed after the game, was that he was hoping he could go off on the front foot. And I wondered if the defensive bench was kind of put together under the assumption that he felt we'd get kind of an early lead, and then he might be in a position where he could kind of pull things back a bit. Okay. But yeah, I do think two fullbacks on the bench, it kind of suggests he kind of knows he doesn't have the answers yet. To me, I think that's kind of saying, I don't want to start you, but I also don't want to rule you out because I think I might need you. Mm-hmm. That was kind of my reading of it. Although that said, I was fully expecting after half an hour Bertrand to come on because it was that bad. Not that he did do that. And I think the decision to push Djenepo up the pitch where he could actually do his thing was kind of part of the kind of important part of the game, and kind of changing the rhythm of it. But yeah, very strange situation there. Yeah,
we spent quite a bit of time discussing the personnel, but I think it's one of those things, especially for this game, where you can see kind of what, like, it's not that Hasenhüttl is clueless, and he's far from it. He definitely understands the players that he has, and he has got an idea of what he wants to do, and he's trying to figure out the best way to do it. And for him to make that change, we could all see that it wasn't working, but for him to, because I think the change that I would have made, or a lot of people would have just been hook Djenepo off because he looks terrible, put Bertrand on, keep the same formation, and I'm not sure that would have worked, and so for him to be able to just move players around the pitch, and I guess this is where we have to praise maybe James Ward-Prowse and Cedric a little bit for being able just to go, like, Cedric's got to go play the wrong side now of defense, and Ward-Prowse has to kind of alter his, pull him back a little bit and alter his positioning. And then Djenepo just gets to go kind of be free and do what he wants, because he just kept showing up everywhere. Like, I don't know, he was running around all over the pitch, and I don't know if that's what it looked like for you in the stands, and maybe the TV camera doesn't do it justice. Maybe he was a bit smarter, but it just looked like he was just running everywhere. And it was great to watch, because he just looked like he was free and carefree and just enjoying his life, whereas before he just looked like he had no idea how to play defense.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I think Boufal and him were given pretty kind of free roles to do what they wanted, kind of behind Adams, I think, and it worked so much better. I think it probably shows that at the moment, I think, this might be fairly controversial, I think Hasenhüttl is a better in-game tactician than he is a pre-game tactician in terms of kind of setting the team up. I think this isn't the first time that I think he's got it wrong from the beginning, but corrected it pretty well. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because I think a lot of the times in the kind of recent past, last few seasons, I think we felt quite frustrated that managers get into a bad situation and then they kind of just let it go a bit, and we kind of struggle to kind of change the balance of the game. And I think Hasenhüttl is very good at doing that, and I think it often catches the other team off balance a little bit, because you're then asking them to kind of make a change. And I think in that mad game against Bournemouth at the back end of last season, we saw a very kind of similar thing, which was how make a change, Hasenhüttl make a change, how make a change, Hasenhüttl make a change. It makes for a much more kind of interesting game. But I do think there are questions, whether those be issues with personnel or kind of injuries and kind of managing a squad. I think there are questions about how we initially set up, but I think you can almost forgive those issues when he's kind of become quite so astute at correcting them. And yeah, I think that change of shape, or not even change of shape, it's the same shape, but kind of a kind of reshuffle, kind of was pretty important. And as you said, probably not the kind of change we'd have looked to make as kind of amateur managers ourselves. I don't know if how much of it was needed. I don't know if he felt he had to reshuffle because he was determined not to use Bertrand for whatever reason, or whether he felt that was the best way to execute it. But at the end of the day, it got him a result. So I feel I probably have to kind of give Hasenhüttl the credit on that one. Yeah.
And I don't want to come across as somebody who thinks he's doing a bad job, because I don't. I think he's done a lot of really good things. And you look at some of the, you just look at some of the repaired relationships. I thought Boufal was gone. And that, you can see how influential he can be in a game. And then you have Djenepo as well, who what he was able to do on the pitch, because he went, I'm going to back up a little bit, and just the first couple of minutes of the game, Højbjerg laid the ball out wide where Djenepo should have been, and he was not there. It just kind of went out of bounds, I think.
Oh yeah, that was funny.
And we were talking about it on Twitter a little bit, and people were like, well, maybe it's the red and white stripes, which definitely threw me off. Seeing another team play in red and white stripes, I don't think I've encountered that very many times as a Saints fan.
It's even more confusing when we're playing in this kind of grey with yellow accent thing, because I don't ever think of us as a grey team either. I'm always kind of like, it'll be yellow if it's not red and white, or it'll be, a kind of interesting colour. But like this kind of grey kit, I'm still taking a while to be like, oh yeah, that's Saints. Yeah, I remember now.
And honestly, I really like that kit. But it's not a natural look, and I think back to, when we had, was it that neon kind of green with the sash, I think, like, I remember that's a different kit, but that helps. But, anyway, there's just things like that. It just wasn't kind of working, but the game was really open. I think anybody tuning in to watch would have been entertained with what was happening. We had shots go off the post. We had saves from both keepers. We had, tackles flying in, and people just kind of, it was a pretty physical match. And I think I was really impressed with Sheffield United. I hadn't watched them very much leading up to this, but I didn't think they looked out of place. I thought they looked like they were up for it. I don't like McGoldrick at all. I think he caused us a lot of problems, but I don't know. I think going back to that kind of Che Adams kind of shot, I was really hoping he was going to find the net there a couple of times, and he just, for some reason, is not allowed to score in the Premier League yet.
I feel really sorry for him. I feel like he's doing a lot of good things. He's just not getting the rub of the green. I think he's been quite unlucky. I think he was particularly unlucky yesterday. Going back to the McGoldrick thing, I don't know how aware you are of his history as a player.
Nope, nothing.
So we signed him at 16, and he kind of like, I think he seemed quite familiar to a lot of Saints fans because he was probably with us for 4 or 5 years. And then since then has had quite a kind of checkered career with like a lot of loan moves. I think he went maybe to Forest, I want to say, from us. And it kind of, we had a lot of loan moves from us, he had a lot of loan moves from them, and it's kind of taken him since the last kind of 3 or 4 years for his kind of career to settle down.
Okay.
I think it is because of this kind of fundamental issue, which is I don't think he scores enough goals for the positions he gets himself in, and I think that was kind of pretty evident yesterday. That he probably isn't good enough for this level. There's probably a reason he spent most of his career in the Championship. Yeah. And I think if I was a Sheffield United fan, I would be pretty frustrated with what he didn't score, if you know what I mean.
No. I think
he had some great opportunities.
Yeah, we did not cover ourselves in glory defensively. There were a couple of opportunities. They had a header, I think, from a corner that we should have done better defending. They should have gotten on frame. There were just a couple of times like that where we just couldn't defend, and McGoldrick kind of came up in situations where he probably should have scored, or at least really tested gun a little bit better, and it just didn't happen. And I'm thankful for that because we wound up with all 3 points, and we needed those 3 points, and it was I'm surprised. I'm surprised there was only 1 goal in the game. You know, for the amount of end to end and how open it was, and how many shots that we wound up kind of having at the end of this. Just scrolling down here. 11 shots for us, 17 for them. I think it could have easily been like 3 or 4 goals each. You know what I mean? It was just one of those crazy games, and they're kind of like quite a lot of really good chances, not just kind of half chances, but like positions where I was genuinely like, oh, well, that was unlucky not to score or whatever. I thought Angus Gunn actually had a really good game. I don't know if you felt the same. Yeah, I think he had a couple of big decisions, whether to come for a ball or, how to defend certain issues, especially when the defense kind of made a mistake in front of him leading up to it. And I thought he did really, really well in that, in all those situations. I was really impressed with him. There were a couple of kind of goal mouth, I wouldn't want to say scrambles because the ball was kind of like not inside the 6-yard box, but there were shots coming in, and he seemed to be there and ready. And I thought his distribution was pretty good as well. He set a couple guys free a couple times. So I thought he had a pretty good game. We won't put up any footage of him because it'll just get taken down because the Premier League somehow finds all of those and takes everything.
Yeah, I don't know how they do that. Yeah, it's amazing. But I thought I kind of think Gunn looks a better player for the end of the last season, when I thought he kind of had some wobbly decisions, probably responsible for us that draw against Huddersfield. I think there were a lot of questions about kind of like, have we kind of prioritized the right kind of transfer? Because when we did buy him, everyone was a bit like, why have we got another senior keeper? Looks a bit weird. But I think we're starting to see what the kind of hype is about, kind of why Pep was allegedly quite keen to keep him. And I think I do wonder how much of that is attributed to the change in goalkeeping coach, because he looks like, as you said, the big decisions he's getting right more of the time. I always felt that he was quite a good kind of shot stopper, but I think there were always questions about kind of his command of his box, whether he's kind of distributing in the right way. And I think you were right. I think he set Adams free with a big long ball at one point, which I thought was kind of quite good. And he's using the ball a bit more intelligently. I think he's not always playing out from the back when they're under pressure, which, to be honest, having seen hard defenders deal with the ball under pressure, probably makes quite a lot of sense. there were several occasions over the last few weeks where I've just been like, please just get rid of the ball now, get rid of it, please. Oh God, like, you know, I don't think it comes naturally to our centre backs, if I'm honest.
No, I've been critical of him a little bit, of Gunn, for going long a couple of times, because when I just thought that by going long and not getting it kind of all the way to the forwards, it kind of winding up right around the halfway line and just having their center backs head the ball all the way back into kind of our defensive third. I was getting annoyed with that because we just couldn't get out. And I thought if we just could get it to our center backs and at least get it a little further up the field and maybe hold it up in their kind of offensive third for a while, or defensive third for a while, that we could just kind of reorganize. But I think his decisions with the ball yesterday were good. And as you say, like, watching us play with the ball under pressure is not, it's hard mouth almost all the time. And it's not great. And I'm not going to really criticize him for his job yesterday. But the one thing that I kind of wanted to point out about the first half was, it was super open, but Djenepo just didn't look strong enough. It seemed like he ran into somebody at one point, whether it was a 50-50 or whatever it was, and he just kind of rolled on the ground. He just kind of looked like a kid almost, playing with adults when he was playing left back. And then I don't know, it made me kind of laugh because it's like, oh, that's cute. You know, he's just rolling on the ground and having a good, like, but then it was also like, I'll also play defense, please. Like, and then once he moved forward though, I mean, you could see how strong he actually is once he was for the goal, because the goal was a lot of strength, a lot of skill, and a lot of composure, because I would say there was nobody on our team who could do that other than Buffal, and Djenepo did it and showed himself well. And he, after he had a couple of shots that were probably better opportunities, easier opportunities that he just didn't quite connect with. And this time he manages to just, you know, sit the defense down and send guys the wrong way and then cut it back nicely into the corner. And I was like, hats off to him for just kind of having that whirlwind of a game, I guess. Yeah,
I think almost he kind of went down easily because he was a bit concerned about having forced to kind of do his job a bit. I think there was some times where he was like, yeah, if I go down here, I might get a free kick, and then we're on the front foot, and I don't have to keep kind of running backwards or tackling. And I think a lot of I think probably learned quite a lot in that first half about the nature of the Premier League and how you very rarely get kind of soft decisions. You kind of, it may be a softer game than it was 10 years ago, but you aren't going to get a lot if you're pushed off the ball. But yeah, I did feel like a lot of his reactions to those challenges were kind of an indication of his own discomfort with what he was being asked to do. Whereas when he's on the front foot and he's near the goal and he knows that there's kind of value in staying up, I think that kind of allows him to kind of make the most of his strength, because I think he is quite a strong winger, as tricky wingers go. I think he's got quite a lot of upper body strength. He strikes me as someone who's quite athletic and has kind of got quite a lot of ability to keep players off the ball. And I think that was kind of evident from his goal, the way he kind of held Norwood off, grappling with him, trying to bring him down, and the ref played advantage. I think he showed, that he does have strength and he can use it, but probably the first half he probably didn't want to use it, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I thought that first off, I think Lee Mason deserves a little bit of credit for how he approached yesterday's game. There were a lot of times, like you said, where there were 50-50 balls or calls that could have gone, and the game could have been one of those games where there was just no rhythm to it, because there were a lot of things that were borderline offenses, borderline just stop, put the ball down and continue play. But I wouldn't say a lot of yellow card challenges, but a lot of definite advantages that were played. And I thought he got most of them right. And maybe it's easy for me to say because all the VAR decisions went our way, but I thought he did a pretty good job, because if he stopped play there, we don't score. I didn't see us scoring from a set piece there. I thought United seemed to have that kind of covered, but I was pretty happy with the referee's decision, and like you said, maybe that forces Djenepo to go, hey, like, I have to do a little bit more, or I can use a little bit more of my strength, or I can be, just change this up a little bit, and good for him for recognizing that and kind of picking up on that and moving the team forward, because I think that goal was basically just him, and I couldn't be. I was super impressed with what he looked like, especially from just how he looked at the beginning of the match, where I thought he was just lost, and maybe like to the point where maybe you go train with the under 18s or under 23s for a while, because it was an atrocious display at the beginning. But like I said, not his fault. I think we have to talk about a couple of things, and there were three kind of big decisions that all went our way. The offside goal for them, and I think it was pretty clear. I don't know what it was like in the stands for you watching, but were the players and were the other Saints fans kind of calling for the offside? Did you guys think it was pretty clear, or how did that play out for you guys?
Yeah, I couldn't see a great deal because we were A, the opposite end of the pitch, and B, I was quite low down. I was probably a couple of yards above the goal, so yeah, we're quite a low point. So actually, all I saw was kind of a ball go in, and then of course the celebrations for the goal. And I couldn't quite work out how they'd managed to kind of score at the back post. But I think it became quite clear quite quickly that there was kind of reason to doubt it, just because of the reaction of our players. Yeah. I'm not necessarily into players pressurising referees or kind of shouting in their faces, but you could see kind of the way we all raised, the raising hands for the offside and the kind of general reaction to it kind of quite quickly reflected doubt about the goal. And I don't know if it's just kind of retrospect and hindsight. I think there was a kind of slightly muted reaction in some parts of the ground just because of that kind of situation afterwards. So yeah, I couldn't make a judgment for myself really from where I was, but kind of got a quick sense of it. And also we couldn't see a screen from where we were. I know from my Sheffield United fan friends, because unsurprisingly I know quite a few, that it was on the screen in the stadium, but we couldn't see it from our perspective. So again, that's kind of like that brief moment of what's kind of going on. Or chanting VAR or whatever, but so it's a bit of a confusing moment. And I think again with I assume you're kind of quite close to getting there, but the Ward-Prowse handball as well. Sure. There was kind of a lot of shouting for a handball, and then a lot of, I think, because we felt like a VAR decision had gone our way, whether that would be evened up sort of thing, which I think is always going to be a worry with VAR. Is if it's a kind of marginal kind of 50-50 call. Is there a temptation for those reviewing it to kind of even it up? And I think that's probably something VAR doesn't take into account for. It's kind of not always going to clear up those kind of subjective moments of kind of, I don't want to say bias, because that's kind of doing a disservice to their professionalism, but in the kind of subconscious, do you kind of think, we gave them a decision, do we give this a decision? And so that was also another moment of kind of nerve, I guess. But yeah, not a lot of comment on VAR because we didn't actually know what's going on.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that's fair, and I think that's part of the issue. That's a lot of people's biggest issue with VAR is that in match, in stadium, there it's really difficult to tell what's going on. And I mean, for me watching on TV, it was really clear. I mean, as soon as the goal goes in, you just go, that can't stand. Like, there has to be something there, because there's no way that works. And the guy who scores is actually onside the whole time. But it's the guy who makes an attempt at the ball initially. Yeah,
I've seen it. Saw the replay on Match Today last night, so I have seen it now. But yeah, I think he's interfering with players, isn't he? That's
yeah, and it's very clear. And I don't think you can be upset about that at all, because if he gets anything on the ball, Gunn has to save it, And so for him to miss it and kind of, or he made an attempt and he was offside. That's the rule. And so it's not. I don't think there's a debate there. But I understand in the ground you don't know that, you don't see it, and so that people are going to be upset about it. But as you mentioned, then
I think Chris Wilder, actually, to be fair to him, was kind of quite open about the fact that was fairly ruled out. So I think, yeah, as you say, when the manager of the opposing side also thinks it should be ruled out, there probably isn't much grounds for debate, is there?
Sure. Yeah. But I understand the initial anger on the part of the fans and things like that. I think that's also understandable. I won't criticize them too much for that. But then you mentioned the James Ward-Prowse handball. I thought that was going to go against us. I don't know if you saw the replay on Match of the Day or what your thoughts on it are after seeing that, but were you surprised that it wasn't given?
Yeah, I'm kind of with Wilder. I think that should have been given against us, which, I'm not sure it'll be positive opinion with all of our listeners, but yeah, I did think there is something quite unnatural about where Ward-Prowse's hands are, and it does look like a kind of downward motion on the ball. So yeah, I'm kind of confused as to why that wasn't given. I could kind of see, if it was the old system with no VAR, how you'd miss it, because I think it was amongst kind of quite a jumble of players quite close together. But if you're using VAR as was the case, I'm surprised it wasn't given.
Yeah, absolutely. The other kind of decision that I thought we were going to get punished for was there was a tackle from Cedric right in the corner of the area, and from I think all but one angle it looked like he didn't get the ball. And then there was one angle, I think from behind the goal potentially, you could see that he did get the ball. And I was surprised again that it didn't go until I saw that last angle. But I mean, what was the reaction for most of the Sheffield United fans in the stadium? Were they starting to get more and more agitated with Lee Mason as the game was going on?
Yeah, I actually had people messaging me who were there, like my Sheffield United fan friends messaging me, being like, "What is Lee Mason doing? Is Lee Mason got a Southampton shirt on? What is he doing? Like, he's having an awful game." And I'm kind of like, "No, what are you talking about? He's doing a great job."
Yeah.
But you could feel there was more and more and more tension from the Sheffield United fans, more kind of noises of discontent. I could quite kind of understand why. I feel like if we'd been on the end of those decisions, as much as I think the majority of them were right, I think I'd start to be quite irritated.
Sure.
I think there is a problem in the Premier League more widely with VAR being very reluctant to overturn decisions. I think we got to a situation in major tournaments recently where VAR was probably getting involved a bit too much, and I think the Premier League have tried to respond to that. So they've kind of tried to say, it has to be really clear and obvious, and if it's not, we're not going to do a lot. And I think that's also kind of adding pressure to VAR in the sense that, are we now going too far and not using it enough? And I think this is going to be a constant issue with VAR for at least the next season, for kind of how we maintain that balance between VAR having a positive impact on the game versus it kind of being resented by fans. And that was the kind of growing impression in the stadium yesterday. Of course, Saints fans weren't feeling that. And when that McBurney goal was ruled out, I think we were pretty much chanting VAR like it was one of our players. So,
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Did you see his tweet after the game?
McBurney?
Yeah.
He clearly just doesn't understand the offside rule from what I could gather.
Yeah. But he tweeted, I think it was from it had to be from the World Cup.
From the African Cup of Nations. Or was it the World Cup?
I don't know. It was one of those.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah, VAR sucks or whatever. And I was like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
This is great. And I want to, part of me, like the kid in me, wants to reply and say something witty and hope that he gets into it, but it's not. I was just like, just leave it alone. Like, there's enough people on Twitter who are really good at riling people up. I don't need to. I don't need to do that.
Yeah, no. I think he made a follow-up comment, didn't he? That was like basically like, but who was it that didn't play the ball? The centre back in the middle. So yeah, but he didn't play the ball. It's like, yeah, well, he's definitely still interfering with play, even if he doesn't interfere with the ball. You should probably know the laws of the game by now. But yeah, that just made it more satisfying, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I was going to ask you, I mean, if he just listens to one run through of Guardian Football Weekly, that will be there, because they talk about it all the time. And yeah, okay, we're moving on. The red card, Billy Sharp. I was not surprised when he came on and had an impact. I thought he did pretty well. It was in the mix, and we were definitely under it for a while. And then it was just a bad tackle. There was some analysis online that said, I think it was, I forget what show it wasn't, but they were talking that the studs weren't showing. It was just the toe into kind of the shin of Armstrong, but it wasn't even the shin. It was like just below the knee, and it was pretty high and still like, not violent, but still dangerous. And in terms of what it could have done to Armstrong had things kind of gone poorly in that situation. So I wasn't really surprised to see him sent off. But at that point, that late in the game, with him having just come on the field and then all the other decisions kind of going up. I mean, how close were the Sheffield United fans to just wanting to find Lee Mason after the game and give him a piece of their mind?
Yeah, I pretty close, I'd say. I think, as much as I do probably think it was a sending off just because of the nature of the action, I'm not sure there was a great deal of contact, really. So while I think it's technically a sending off, I can see how if you're a Sheffield United fan and you have, a kind of talismanic figure kind of come on, and he was actually getting a really kind of positive reaction from Saints fans too because of kind of his contribution to our journey. I could see why you'd be a bit irritated by it, particularly having had everything else gone against you, rightly or otherwise. So, yeah, I think that probably was... I think it might have been the point in the game where tensions were at their highest, but also kind of that finished them off in a way. I felt after that point, psychologically, they were kind of like, when you have that feeling that everything's going against you and whatever you did, you'd never win anyway, so what's the point? Because we're not being treated fairly, and I think that kind of sapped a lot of the energy out of the ground.
Uh-huh.
I have to say the atmosphere all day from where I was sitting was kind of one of the best that I've kind of experienced in the kind of away games I've done in the Premier League. I thought the atmosphere in the ground was really good. Saints fans were doing their fair share too, but it was kind of a really fiery atmosphere, but a really kind of fun one to be in. And I think that sharp sending off probably kind of dissipated it slightly once the kind of initial tension of the decision had kind of worn off. I think that probably put an end to it in a way.
Yeah.
Especially because I think he had quite a positive contribution to them when he came on. So yeah, I think that was probably the final straw in a way.
Yeah. I was happy to get sent off just because I thought it was going to lead us to. I thought that was going to help us win. I thought if he stays on, there's a good chance they looked like they were pressing for a goal, and we were kind of doing the Saints thing of kind of retreating and trying to be solid defensively. And we saw from the beginning of the game that's just not. That's not when we're best. We're best going forward, I think, in pressing teams, and we were having trouble at that point, and it's normal. It's the normal kind of a flow of a football match when you're ahead and away, and people are coming, the home team's coming, and that's just what's supposed to happen, I think. But overall, I think we have to be happy with the result, and no matter what it took to get us there. And I find it weird that we haven't. I think this is 3 matches in a row where one team has finished with a red card. It was Brighton where we managed to win, and then the draw at home against Manchester United, and then now this. And you kind of wonder how long that trend's going to continue, and if that's normal. I'm not sure. I don't do all the in-depth statistics, but I was just taking a quick look at the number of fouls that were going on, because I mentioned earlier that it seemed like Lee Mason let a lot go. Still, there were, I think, 17 fouls total, but that's under the average for us, and that's under the average, I think, for the Premier League. Most teams are somewhere a little bit higher than that per match. So I think he did let a little bit go, and even though I don't know, like I said, I thought he did a decent job, but I had a point, and that point was, I guess coming to the end of the game, I think we have to be happy with all of that. But I wanted to just give a quick shout out to Adams and think, or ask you kind of about it. I know he played for Sheffield United at some point in his career. They were quite happy to see him come back and see what he was going to be about, and they were kind of glad that he had moved on, I think. And I think they all kind of like him, and I think that's great. But I thought yesterday was probably his best performance in a Saints shirt in this season, and it's a small sample size, but were you impressed with the way he looked yesterday in playing up top kind of on his own instead of with a partner?
I think he actually looks more comfortable on his own. I think he put in some excellent kind of quite unselfish runs into channels, kind of provided an option or kind of as an outlet, and I think he did have a really good game. I think he's just getting quite unlucky at the moment. That effort that hit the post being the kind of obvious one, and that header as well, which Henderson saved pretty well, I thought. yeah, I just feel like he's not necessarily doing a lot wrong at the moment. But he's not. It's not quite coming. It's not quite happening for him. And I think it's just going to be a case of both kind of manager and the fans being quite patient with him, because we know that strikers from the Championship often have a bit of time adapting, and I think he's actually adapting really quickly. I think there are questions about him playing in that kind of 4-2-2 system with Danny Ings. I'm not sure yet whether they have the required understanding to play as kind of a pair. And as I said, I think that might be partly why Adams looked a bit better on his own, with kind of a free roll Boufal next to him or behind him. And I think maybe perhaps when Redmond's fit, it'll be Redmond and Adams that are given a go. That said, Danny Ings is always really good at the pressing game, so I don't know how you keep him out. But yeah, I think things will change for Adams. It's perhaps, I think, because Hasenhüttl was so keen on him, and because we tried to get him in January, I think that developed a lot of kind of quite high expectations amongst our fans, which probably hasn't helped him, and hasn't helped the kind of general reaction to him. But I think from the reaction on Twitter yesterday after the game, people realise that he's doing a lot of good stuff, and he's getting good opportunities. And I think yesterday was evidence that he's getting closer to putting those opportunities away. I think there were a few opportunities in the first few games. I'm thinking particularly a decent-ish opportunity against Manchester United where he kind of slashed at the ball and looked a bit nervous. I think he's getting, the post and a really good save is kind of indication that it's improving. And I'm kind of feeling quite positive about him, despite the lack of goals, really.
Yeah, I think he's on the right track, and I'm willing to be patient, but I think that's also, I think I've been too patient with people in the past, so I hope that we're right in how we're kind of approaching it. And I don't know, I think he's making the right move. If he hits the post and forces the keeper to make a good save the first game of the season, and then has some of these other performances now, I think that's the wrong way. But that the team has been kind of up in the air. I haven't done a predicted lineup all season because I have no idea how the team's going to go out. And I had planned to start after the international break of having some sort of idea, and I just didn't feel I couldn't get the press conference to load, so I was only reading other people's comments about what Hasenhüttl said and reading on the website, and I want to hear things from him, because you can get a little bit more if you can hear his voice and that kind of stuff. And I just didn't feel like I had a good enough understanding. And even yesterday when I saw the team sheet, I just said, like, these 11 players will play, because I have no idea how they're gonna do this, and that's just the way it goes. But we have a couple of questions, and before we get to the listener questions, I want to ask you one more thing. Like, I thought Romeu had a really good game yesterday. I thought he was again super important for all the defensive solidity that we lack. I think he is the one that kind of holds it all together in front of them, and I can't imagine what we would look like without him there. But I don't know if that is me just liking Ori Romeu a lot, or if that is something that you or anybody else that you've talked to picked up on at all yesterday.
Well, first of all, on this subject, Ori Romeu gets a lot of really unfair criticism in my book. I think people expect him to do everything, and that's not his game. He's not a box-to-box midfielder. He is really good at breaking up play, and when he's on it, he's kind of, as you said, kind of pretty vital to what we do, especially with all of our defensive issues, frailties, changes in shape, players that the manager doesn't like or whatever. I think he is really important. And I think he hasn't always been on form, and there have been problems with the way he's using the ball in a kind of forward sense. But at the end of the day, the guy is immensely professional, normally pretty consistent, I'd say. And I think there have been times where people have kind of almost taken that for granted. And in a team which has had quite a lot of turbulence in recent years, either with managers or squad, changes and purchases, he's been kind of a pretty steady presence. And I think he's finding his way under a different manager, and he's showing kind of what he's about. I think he was really excellent yesterday. I don't know if Pierre Højbjerg's been quite up to his usual standards in recent weeks. I was quite surprised to see the BBC give him the man of the match yesterday, because I think there were quite a lot of opportunities he had to kind of move possession forward, and he kind of misplaced passes or wasn't quite making the right decisions, and he doesn't look quite to his usual very high standards, and I think that's made Romeo's performances stand out even more, because he's having to turn over possession quite a lot. I think we're not always using possession in the best way, and I think our tendency to be quite direct means that you will lose possession quite a bit, and you will need to win it back. And I think he's really very good at that. So yeah, I'm incredibly impressed with his recent performances, and it's kind of getting back to the player who under Puel, who was our kind of player of the season and was kind of loved by the fans. I think we're being reminded that he hasn't stopped being that player. You know, he might have struggled with certain changes or form or whatever, but he still is a pretty important player and a pretty good guy to have around. And he kind of gets on with it as well, which hasn't always been the case for some players.
And I think the formation, and I think what's become more and more evident is teams will find weaknesses in your team. And, you know, when Højbjerg's having a slight off day, or when Djenepo's playing at left wing back, like, teams will find that and exploit that almost every match. Like, that's what's going to happen. And I think that Højbjerg's been asked to do a lot in midfield in terms of going forward, just because that's not Romeo's game. But Romeo winning the ball back and breaking up play and just kind of doing all the things that kind of go on almost behind the scenes, like that, I think that allows us to go forward in the way that we are and play with two guys on the pitch in Buffal and Djenepo, who are not, you know, super defensive. Buffal's gotten a lot better in terms of tracking back and putting in the effort. And I think that's one of the things that Ralph asked of him. And I think he's done that very, very well, but that's still kind of a free role. And Redmond has a free role basically when he's on the pitch as well. Even though Hassan has asked him to come back and help more and try more on the defensive side of things, he still is allowed to kind of do as he pleases going forward, and often is stranded up the pitch once we lose the ball. But that's okay, because we have guys like Romeo who can do that. But we're going to go long unless we get to some of these questions, and I hope, is that okay with you if we head that way?
Yeah, carry on. Yeah.
I want to do this. So as always, people can send in their questions via social media. They can send them in via email at southamptondelivery@gmail.com. And patrons for the show, as one of the perks, get priority for having their questions answered each and every week. Fred Lazaro, who's at Fred Lazaro 2011 on Instagram, says the defense was shaky again. What's the solution? And if you have this, go down to Staplewood right now, and Ralph is there. He will listen, and you will. You can buy a house in Sheffield and anywhere else you want.
Okay. I'm not going to pretend to have answers that Ralph Hasenhüttl doesn't have. I don't know what the answer is. I feel like the answer was possibly spending some money on a centre-back, and possibly, when you get one on loan, not getting him sent off. But, you know, these are all part of the ongoing issues. Or
playing him at centre-back.
Yeah, or playing him at centre-back. Or, you know, that England international that you've got, you know, or ex-international that you've got, maybe play him because you have no other left-backs. These are just some of the ideas. But then again, this is Southampton Football Club, so we don't do things the obvious way. If there are issues, as there are with Bertrand, and if you don't have Danso available, I don't know what else you do, to be honest. He's tried. I think there is the argument that the defenders look a little bit better in a pair than they do in a three, but then you have all the other issues among kind of in wide areas. If you don't play those three, I think we struggle a bit. I'm not sure there's an obvious answer. I think there are limitations with the quality we have, so I think that's always going to be a problem. And I think the very direct style we play, we are quite vulnerable to counterattacks.
Yeah.
So short of changing the whole way we play, which probably makes us much less of a threat, I'm not sure there is really an obvious answer. Sorry, that's not very helpful.
No, I think that's the truth. Is where you can only use the pieces you have, and the one thing you have to remember about Vestergaard is if you play the 4-2-2-2, there is no way you can play Djenepo as a left back, right? He can only play as a left wing back. That would be a disaster. And Vestergaard needs cover on that side, in wide areas, whether it's at a back 4 or a back 3 or back 5. He needs to have somebody there. And so I think having Djenepo there initially to start yesterday, even though it didn't work out as a 5, like you have some pace to cover, hopefully. Djenepo just didn't know how to do it. And that's okay because he's young and he's not a left back. And we've discussed this at length, I think. But I'm not sure if you just drop Vestergaard. I didn't think he had a great game yesterday. I thought he made a lot of mistakes, but once again, I don't know if it's fair to criticize him for having a guy who's, running around all over the pitch and not in position and not where you expect your left back to be. But I don't know. So I think the only thing you can do is just, I don't know, make Romeu stay in front of them and just break up play and have Romeu do all of the work and just try to keep it out of our defensive area as much as possible.
So the way to tackle the defense is don't let them have the ball under any circumstances. Yes. Right. Okay, cool.
And that'll happen, I'm sure, because nobody is going to hit us on the counterattack or anything else. Anyway, let's move on. So we have some other questions from Twitter, and some of them we've addressed already. From Saints World FC, which of course is one of the partners of the Total Saints podcast, says, will Ryan Bertrand be able to regain a starting position at left back? We kind of talked about that earlier, and it seems, I think we both agree that it's kind of a personnel issue, and it's not that Ralph doesn't know how to deal with individuals, because he's done well with some of the other guys that have come back from loan and things like that. So I don't know how that's going to work out, but I'm not sure we can answer anything more than we've kind of stated. And unfortunately, it goes again for another question that's there from Jamie Prognell, who's at Jamie_Prognell. Says Che Adams up front on his own with support from attacking midfield, or up front in a 2 alongside Danny Ings. And I think we talked about that as well. That we kind of said he looked a little bit more comfortable on his own. And overall, I think it's just going to take time. And I think the positions he got himself into, and you can tell me if I'm summing this up the wrong way, but the positions he was getting himself into on his own, the kind of unselfish runs that he was making, and the space that he made for 2 players like Djenepo and Buffal to kind of run into and create, I think worked out best for us. And I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that, or if that's kind of where we stand on those 2. Yeah, no, that sounds pretty right to me. Yeah. Okay. All right. We have a couple more from some of the patrons that, serious or not, we'll give them a read here. It says, a question for the pod: in 6 months, comes from Justin Woodward. In 6 months' time, will Moussa fall and take the foul? I don't know if this is in reference to him at the beginning of the game, where he seemed to fall over a lot, or at the end of the game when he scored his goal, when he stayed on his feet and did it. But do you think that maybe the Premier League will influence him to do one more than the other as time goes on? Yeah, I think it's not necessarily about his kind of familiarity with the league, but more what he feels is going to get out of it as a player and from the situation he's in, which makes perfect sense to me. So yeah, I think if he stays on his feet yesterday and does what he does, and then the shot goes wide, or he gets it tackled away shortly after that, but long enough that Lee Mason said, well, I played the advantage, it's not coming back because there was an advantage there and you had a shot. I think then we would be critical, and the narrative for me would definitely be, all game you fell on the ground and now you decide to stay on your feet and so I think the reactionary stuff from me and from probably everybody else would have been a little bit different had he not put it in the corner, and I think that's just normal for us to do, and probably not healthy for us to do, because the expectation of all of these guys is that they're going to be perfect, and they're indeed not. But I hope he stays on his feet. And the other question that we have there, I won't out you for asking this, Mr. Patron, but in 6 months' time, will Moussa be looking for flats in Liverpool? That has been all over my Twitter timeline. I don't know about you. Yeah. But there it is. I've got no time for it. I've got no time for it. No. To be honest, like, even if he carried on at the kind of ridiculous rate he started, he's not getting a move to Liverpool in 6 months' time, because he is, I feel like there'd be some kind of mob coming to St Mary's protesting that we've sold another player to Liverpool. Yeah.
and B, I just think he's still incredibly raw. He's still got a long way to go in his development, and I think Liverpool are, such a good side now and such a kind of tactically sophisticated side.
He doesn't quite
that he's not going to fit in yet. I mean, he has the raw materials to one day be kind of that kind of player that fits in, kind of quite well at Liverpool, given their preference for fast kind of breaks. But he's such a long way from the finished product, which is great for us because that means we've probably got a year or two of enjoying kind of his development and what he can do. Which probably links quite well with that other question we got on Twitter about Hasenhüttl and how we can keep him.
Yeah.
I think it's a similar thing. I'm not saying that he hasn't developed fully like Djenepo has. He's a manager in his prime, but we probably get to enjoy him for a year or two before someone else kind of picks him out. And I think that will probably be a theme for this team if things go well. We'll be back to where we were a few years ago with kind of managing change, managing players teams going after our players, and our managers. And as much as that was frustrating, that's a signal that things are going well, and that people are impressing, whether that's on or off the pitch. And that's something we will have to learn to embrace and kind of develop strategies for. In terms of replacing people, and doing it in a way that is better than we have over the last couple of seasons. But I will avoid ranting about that right now.
Yeah, I'll just say that I think we can be frustrated by the fact that happens, that people come after our players, but it's even more frustrating to have the last couple of years where nobody wants our players. That's
absolutely.
Even worse. And so at least now we can enjoy them being good and going somewhere, and then we'll deal with them going somewhere versus us being poor and not being able to ship people out. I think that is worse. And that's personal preference, but hopefully people understand that. So I have one more question, and then we'll go because we've gone over, and I don't care. I've enjoyed this, so I hope you have too, and I hope the listeners have, because that's important as well. Fantasy. I had an absolute nightmare this week. Captain Sterling used 2 transfers to somehow get De Bruyne in, and have Zinchenko. And I also had Van Dijk in the team. And so everybody just had a nightmare.
I don't think I really want to talk about it. It was really awful.
Okay.
In many ways. I even benched Cantwell for that goal for Norwich.
Me too.
So I had, like you, had a City defender, except I had Otamendi, which felt even worse because he was diabolical. But that was a really bad week for FPL, and let's not talk about it.
I had a really good first week. It's been all downhill from there.
It's just gone downhill.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's not been great. But anyway, we'll move on. James Willis, who's at James Willis 86, says, I had a job interview once, and the opening question was, you're having a dinner party with 4 famous people from history. Who are they? Here's my answer. He says David Beckham, Tutankhamun, Matt Letizia, and Ricky Lambert. If you were going to do this, it seems like he's gone 3 footballers and 1 person from history. I didn't read that when I replied to him earlier because it was very early, I'll say. And then for you, if you were going to answer that, who would you go to sit down to dinner with? And assume, of course, language and everything else is not an issue.
Well, I was thinking about this, and he's got 3 footballers. Now, footballers, I don't want to be mean, but they don't strike me as necessarily the best dinner party people, when you're kind of relying on conversation. Is that harsh? Maybe it is.
I haven't had conversations with enough professional footballers to know if that's harsh. I've seen interviews.
I'm just going kind of off interviews, and kind of like general conversation. Maybe it's just a media thing, but
maybe. I mean,
I'm not convinced of that as a strategy for a dinner party. But I guess they would have a lot in common though.
Early on in this show, I think Glastonbury, one of the guys had just gone to Glastonbury, and I said, which member of the team would you take to Glastonbury? He said Charlie Austin. I think that's a good, like, if you're going to go have one of those weekends, I think Charlie Austin is the guy you take. Do I want him now? Like, no. Nope. Do I want Charlie Austin at a dinner party? No. Nope. I think for me, there'd be a professional baseball player that I would take. I would take Craig Biggio. because he's my all-time just favorite baseball player.
No idea who that is.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
He's an undersized guy who played 3 positions and was an all-star and just worked really, really hard and did everything the team asked for the team that I like.
Oh yeah, I like players like that. Yeah.
That's also why I like Oriol Romeu.
And James Milner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well,
exactly. So the running theme here.
I wasn't going to bring that up. Yeah. Between my love for James Milner and Max Rushton, it's not. This isn't turning out to be a great show.
This is not going well. No.
I won't say Max Rushton because he wouldn't make the list anyway.
Okay. That's reassuring.
I think I would, if I was going to go footballer, I would take Nathan Redmond. I think I have questions for him based on kind of what's happened in his life over the past couple of seasons since coming to Saints, and I would hopefully want to just be able to hear a little bit more about him, because I think he keeps himself kind of more guarded now, in terms of he's not as open online as he once was, and so I have questions about that. And I don't know. I generally don't think about these things because I don't, hypothetical things don't, I almost can, it sounds really harsh, but like, I don't want to waste the time to think about them.
Yeah, you're like me. I'm a great pragmatist, realist. Don't really get into those kind of things.
Yeah. Maybe I'd take the officer who just gave me a ticket, have some questions for him.
Yeah. Maybe as to what happened when he left and what happened when he came back. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I told you $447. I looked it up while we were recording. That's what I just paid for a ticket. It's not Mario Lamina speeds, but apparently not that far away either.
Ooh, ouch. And
I don't know. I don't know the other two. Those are the two I would take, and that would be a really awkward conversation because those guys could not be more different from one another. But
fair enough.
Who do you have if you're going?
I was really tempted to go kind of like hyper controversial and go for like Adolf Hitler to try to like understand what the hell's going on. But I feel like, that's probably not great for a dinner party. So I'll stay away from the controversial figures. I'm thinking like, I like the football thing because obviously I like talking about football. But as I said earlier, I'm not sure how many professional footballers are that interesting to talk to. I mean, for some of them clearly are.
Yeah.
Some of them not so much. I think kind of one of the kind of big influential managers on the game, like, I don't know, like Johan Cruyff or Pep Guardiola, one of those kind of like tacticians, or even Mourinho. I think he'd quite good dinner party fun. So yeah, I feel like I'd go kind of down that route if I was going down football. But yeah, I think Barack Obama would be really interesting dinner party. Yeah. If he was able to be open about everything, I think he'd be quite an interesting one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like you. I don't tend to entertain these things in great detail, so I don't think I have a full 4. But those are kind of branches I'd go down: charismatic politicians and interesting football minds, I feel.
Yeah. So if we're doing that, I'd probably go Arsene Wenger.
Like that. I'd be interested to see what he had to say.
And then if I was going to go like U.S. president, God, I'd probably have to go FDR. Like that. Oh yeah. I think that's it. I think I figured out my 4 because that would be try to cover all the bases. I'm not sure what the conversation would be like, but I think there would be I'd learn a lot one way or another. And this has got to be a full 7-course meal because otherwise we're never getting through the questions I have and the conversation topics that I want to cover.
Yeah, it's difficult how you'd make it a dinner party, not an interview, isn't it, really? But
yeah, well, I'm not good at either one. My kids will tell you when I cook, it's chicken and rice, a lot of broccoli. But anyway,
I won't be coming to your dinner party then.
That's fine. That's all right.
Seems like quite a long way to go anyway for chicken and rice.
Yeah, and you can probably get it better down the street. Honestly, I'm sure Birmingham has plenty of places to eat that are better than my house. But you're always welcome if you want. If you guys are out here.
Thanks.
I mean that. If there are a few people who have.
You haven't really sold it to me, but other than that.
Well, I do live in California.
That is true. Yeah, I do. I have been twice before. I'm a California fan.
Okay. Yeah, it's not Prague, but plenty of microbreweries. Lots of coastline.
Yeah.
Sports. That not as good as the Premier League, of course, but it's there. But Lucy,
I'm all for trying new sports. I just don't understand them. It's all good.
Yeah, when people start, the best thing for me in terms of my interaction with my family is when everybody starts tweeting about cricket, and then I can just go like, okay, like I can be done now.
Yeah, it's a bit like me in baseball. I just have no idea what's going on. I imagine it's the same for you in cricket.
Sometimes I forget that I'm on the podcast account, not my personal account, and I just keep tweeting Astro stuff, and it's like, just stop, because they're great. I don't know. We'll see. As long they may get back to the World Series this year, and I will be super excited if they do. But different show. Anyway. Lucy, as always, I've had a great time just chatting with you, and I think there was a lot to kind of unpack, and it was a pleasure to be able to talk to you about a game you were able to be there for, and at least we had there was a lot of interesting stuff that happened this week, and I think the next show will come out, ironically enough, the day we play the team down the road, so this is I'm not going to do a preview of that show, at least for everybody, maybe for the patrons, but it'll be I don't know. I'm excited about that. I don't know how you feel about it, but I hope it all kind of goes well, and I hope I hope everything goes well in terms of House and Total Saints podcasts and all that other stuff. And just thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure as always, and I think we had some interesting conversation, although probably covered that we're not the best for dinner parties.
Yeah, I'll serve the food. I do that quite frequently, but I don't need to do. I'm probably not the best guest. Dinner, house party, anything. Probably just not me. But anyway, thanks.
Thank you.
And that does it for this episode of the Southampton Delivery Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed it. Special thanks this week goes out to Lucy Highnett. Thanks again for taking the time to join me. In addition to all of your other recording and reporting and just kind of life stuff, I appreciate you making the time to come on the show again. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I'm glad Saints got a win for you this year instead of the typical 3-0 defeat to Newcastle away, where you also have to go because your husband is a Newcastle fan. If you want to get in touch with Lucy, they can do that on Twitter at Lucy Highnett. If you want to get in touch with this show on Twitter or Instagram, we're at SFCDELL_IVERY. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/SFC Delivery. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Acast, Google Play, TuneIn Radio, or wherever else you listen to podcasts. You can get links to all of those on the show website, southamptondelivery.com, where you can also sign up for the newsletter, leave some feedback, do whatever you want. There are a few select people who have decided to support this show monetarily, and I very much appreciate that. They do that via Patreon, so you can go to patreon.com/SFC Delivery, and there you can support the show. Choose, but you just listening has been great. So thank you so much for listening. Supporting the show monetarily is not something you are comfortable with, but you want to help. Share the show, leave a review on iTunes. That stuff helps very, very much. And like I said before, you just listening is probably the most important thing and the thing I appreciate the most. This show is partnered with the Southampton page. For all your Southampton FC news and deeds, be sure to follow the Southampton page on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Lots of good stuff going out. We'll keep you up to date with everything going on throughout the week and leading up to match day. And then during the match, if you are unable to attend or watch the match on TV. The logo for the show is done by Matt Beeling. The music for the show comes courtesy of the Free Music Archive at freemusicarchive.org. The intro song is Epic Song by Boxcat Games, and the end of show credits that you're listening to right now is Aim is True by Poddington Bear. We'll be back next week with another episode. We'll talk with Matt Beeling, the guy who made the logo, as I said before. We'll talk about the match against Bournemouth, and we'll look forward to the match against the other team. So thanks for listening, and until next time, remember that together, we march on. I have an unnatural kind of affection for Max Rushton. I don't know why. I love him, and I know a lot of people don't.
That is.
What's that?
That's a strange thing to like Max Rushton. That's
really?
Not cool. Yeah.
Not cool? Okay.
No.
I'll cut it.